everyone. So, for this week, we are going to be reading Born Curious 20 Girls Who Grew Up to Be Awesome Scientists by Martha Freeman, illustrated by Katie Wu. This is new to our collection. I strongly recommend it. It goes through about 20 different scientists and what they did very concisely, very quickly, but also it really gets into what they were trying to do during their particular time and what they had to overcome. Fascinating. So for today, we're going to read Carol Greeter, molecular biologist, born 1961. And I chose her because she's local and she had an extraordinary life. She did some amazing things and she also had a learning disability. So interesting. So here we go. She's 10 years old and her physics professor father has moved the family to Heidelberg, Germany for a year. Life in an apartment in the hilly old city is very different from life in their house in flat Davis, California. She doesn't speak any German. How is she even supposed to find her school? Her dad's attitude is the same as usual. You'll figure it out. And so she does. A little more than a decade later, when she's a graduate student working in a university lab, she'll call on that same self-reliance to help her discover an enzyme, telomerase, that is crucial to the health of cells and organisms from protozoa to people. Eventually, she will share a Nobel Prize for her discovery. Carol Greeter turned 10 in 1971. By then, she had been figuring things out on her own for a while. Her mother, who suffered from depression, died when she was 6. Her father loved her and her brother Mark, and he encouraged them, but he also worked a lot. At home in California, Carol and Mark walked to school by themselves. In Heidelberg, they learned the bus system, then rode city buses to school, where the classes were taught in German. By Christmas time, they were getting along fine in their new language, and they had made friends in the big apartment building where they lived. Using string pulleys, they passed notes to kids who lived on the lower floors. Sometimes they banged on the radiators to communicate with them in code, and got in trouble for making so much noise. From the time she started school in California, Carol had thought of herself as different, even stupid. She had trouble learning to read, write, and especially spell. Once a week, she was called out of class for special tutoring. It was embarrassing. Much later, Carol found out she had a learning challenge called dyslexia, which makes it hard to relate speech sounds with words and letters. By then, she had come up with a way to cope on her own. She couldn't sound out syllables the way other kids did, so she memorized whole words and how they are spelled, thousands of them. She got really good at memorizing, which turned out to be helpful in science and other classes later on. In Germany, Carol was different because she was American. Her best German friend, Jiska, was different too. All the other kids at school were Christian, but Jiska was Jewish. When Carol returned to California and started junior high, she realized she herself didn't mind being different. Instead of trying to be one of the cool kids, she picked friends like Jiska, friends who were interesting. In high school, Carol considered herself a nerd, but not a science nerd, not one of the kids who went home to her chemistry set. Instead, she was president of the American Field Service Club, which promoted international understanding. Most of Carol's friends went to college in Northern California, but Carol, once again, wanted to be different. She left home for Santa Barbara, which is on the Southern California coast, planning to study marine biology. Her first project was about sand crabs, but it involved a lot of counting and observing. She found this boring. She wanted to think creatively, to make things happen, to do experiments. A professor and friend of the family, B. Sweeney, suggested she try working in a lab. Bingo! She liked everything about it, including the friendly people who worked with her. In graduate school, Carol joined a lab run by one of the top cell biologists in the world, Elizabeth Blackburn. Elizabeth and her colleagues were studying chromosomes, the molecules within a cell that contain genetic information. More specifically, they were looking at telomeres, structures on the ends of chromosomes that seem to help protect them from damage. When cells divided, each telomere lost bits of its DNA, but something enabled some telomeres to regain their strength. What was that something? Could it be an enzyme? It wasn't clear that the answer to this question would do anybody any practical good. Still, it was interesting and basic to biology, so Carol decided to investigate. Looking back later, she called the quest a dive into the unknown. Like Elizabeth, Carol studied telomina, single-cell organisms that motor around in fresh water. They make good subjects for telomere research because each contains around 40,000 chromosomes. Carol had to figure out what experiments to do and how to carry them out. She worked 12-hour days and taught herself DNA cloning and enzyme purification in the process. But she also found time for fun. She bicycled and competed in triathlons. She went out for lattes with her colleagues. They played practical jokes on each other, wrote skits, and found any excuse for a party. No one else was working on Christmas Day in 1984 when Carol went into her lab to check an autoradiograph of her latest experiment. An autoradiograph is a special kind of image that shows the chemistry behind a process. In this case, the elongation of a telomere. Looking at that image, Carol recognized a pattern indicating the presence of an enzyme. Could it be the one she was looking for? Carol couldn't be sure. It would take several more months before she and Elizabeth confirmed the presence of an enzyme and came up with a name, telomerase. But that day, Carol was excited enough to celebrate. She went home, put on Bruce Springsteen's Born in the USA, and danced. In the following years, Carol and others learned that telomeres limit the number of times a cell can divide, making them critically important to understanding aging, cancer, and other diseases. What at first appeared to be only a curiosity-driven science question is in fact fundamental to developing new medical treatments. For their work on telomeres, Carol, Elizabeth, and Jack Szostak shared the Nobel Prize for Medicine or Physiology in 2009. By the time she received the huge honor, Carol was a professor at Johns Hopkins University with two children, Gwendolyn and Charles. When the university held a press conference to announce that she had won, she brought her children with her and made sure they appeared in the newspaper photos. How many men have won the Nobel in the last few years? And they have kids the same age as mine, and their kids aren't in the picture? She told an interviewer at the time. That's a big difference, right? And that makes a statement. So Carol Greeter, here's a summary of what she did. Achievement: molecular biologist who discovered an enzyme that protects cells from deterioration, leading to an entirely new field of study with implications for prolonging life and curing disease. Quote, when young women ask my advice about, can I be a scientist and have a family and a career? I tell them, absolutely. You should do what you love to do, and then you have to find the path and a way to do that. And I don't say it's going to be easy. Fascinating fact. One day in 2009, Carol was up at dawn folding laundry when she got a phone call from Sweden. It was still early when she hung up, but she woke her children. I won the Nobel Prize, she told them. You can go back to sleep now. And that's our scientist that we chose for today. I will be returning this book, so it will be available, and please remember the library is open. You can do curbside pickup right now. So if you have any interest in science at all, or even if you have a paper due or something, this is a good book for that. So there it is. If you have any other requests, please let your teacher know or email me directly and I'll try to get it to you. Okay? Thanks everyone. Stay safe.